This week on the ZonaZoo Sports Report, a recap of Arizona football versus Washington, women's volleyball versus Oregon, and a preview of football versus Stanford.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the ZonaZoo Sports Report. I'm Gabrielson, alongside me Maddy Rundin. And Maddy, a big weekend for Arizona sports across the board. So we have a jam-packed show today. Yeah. I thought I'd bust out the specs for it, show a little something.
Oh, you look very distinguished.
Oh, thank you.
You know who did not look so distinguished this weekend was the Arizona football team, headed up to Seattle for a key road game. Looked like they pretty much had the game in the bag heading into the fourth quarter, up by 12 points with 4 minutes left. However, two late touchdowns by Washington in the last 3 minutes, as well as one of those on a pretty controversial call, handed Arizona their first conference loss of the season in heartbreaking fashion.
Absolutely, Maddy. And Nick Foles looked good once again, threw for 384 yards, a touchdown, a couple of interceptions, of course, the one controversial one at the end on that screen to DeVogelaere Dean. We'll take a look at that picture a little later in the show. But Jake Locker came as advertised. The defense did slow him down to an extent. He did run for 92 yards, 56 of those on that first quarter touchdown run. But all in all, the Cats looked good. It was a very controversial ending, and one that I think Mike Stoops and the gang really want back.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And speaking of that controversial call, that leads into a new segment that we have here on the Sports Report called Picture of the Week. And so, no doubt, the picture this week is obviously the screen pass to DeVogelaere Dean. And, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so let's check that out.
That was our new segment called Picture of the Week. Very appropriate, as that was a very controversial play. But if you have any ideas for the upcoming segments, go ahead and shoot us an email at zonazoo@email.arizona.edu. We'll try and get those on the air for you. All right, Maddy, switching sports over to women's volleyball. They hosted the Oregon schools this past weekend.
Yeah, well, I think it's safe to say that women's volleyball fared a little bit better than our football team did. They actually did sweep the visiting Oregon schools, including number 11 Oregon. And in that game, 5 Wildcats recorded double-digit kills, and Tiffany Owens continued to be a beast up front, recording her 8th double of the season.
That's right. Their next match will be Friday against ASU down in Tempe, and that will be broadcast on FSN Arizona. Okay, how about the other football, as known in Europe, the women's soccer team? They opened conference play this past weekend as they traveled to LA to take on UCLA and USC. Both games ended in a 2-0 loss, so they started off the season a little shaky, but they will have a chance to redeem themselves as the Washington schools come into town this weekend.
All right, and that leads us into another new segment here on the ZonaZoo Sports Report, which we like to call the Play of the Week.
Perfect.
And I believe that this play is very appropriate. It happened actually in another game versus another Southern California school. It was women's soccer versus LMU. Let's go take a look at that clip.
As you can see, things escalated pretty quickly in that soccer match. Probably one of my favorite Arizona sports clips of all time, as someone probably said something bad about her mama.
Definitely, Ben. And speaking of mamas, it is family weekend here at the University of Arizona, which means Arizona football has its first home game in 5 weeks. They are set to take on the Stanford Cardinal, who bring with them the leading rusher in the Pac-10 in Toby Gerhart, who is averaging 124 yards.
That's right. They also bring in freshman quarterback sensation Andrew Luck into town, who's been very good at making plays, staying steady even for a freshman. He's 3rd in the conference in total yards. Also, their kick returner, Chris Owusu, comes in averaging 40 yards a pop, and he's got 3 touchdowns. He's going against Arizona's 8th best kickoff coverage team in the conference. So 8 out of 10. Not looking so good. That'll be a very interesting matchup to watch.
That will do it for us on this week's edition of the ZonaZoo Sports Report. Next week's show, we will bring you highlights and analysis of the Stanford game, as well as a preview of next week's game against UCLA. For Ben Gabrielson, I'm Maddy Rundin. Bear down, Wildcat.